Hello, it's a Spire Chat. In this, the year 2036,
Yes.
it is. I've been playing a bit of Spire recently. It's a good game. Um, a lot of the time when I'm playing Slay the Spire, people ask me, hey, what are you thinking about when you make that decision? Which is awkward because I've played thousands of hours of the game, and so in order to answer that question, I would have to tell you, like, everything that's in the game, which would take a really long time. But one thing I've been thinking about more than usual recently, so I thought it would be nice to unpack it in like a little video, is the boss relics in the game and how they change decision making, especially in Act 1. So in this video, I'm going to talk about all the different boss relics that exist, and I'm going to talk about what do I change about my play because I'm cognizant of the existence of that boss relic and the possibility I might be offered it. Is it like easy for me to change that, or is this something that's like pretty hard and so like I don't really pull it off very often? And is it worthwhile to do that at all? As I talk through the individual boss relics, you'll probably get a better sense for what I mean. Before I get into this though, I want to like just start by saying when you reach the end of the act, you get offered 3 relics, right? And you're going to take the best one, presumably. If you're trying to win, you're going to take the one that gives you the highest chance to win, in your opinion. And because of that, when you're thinking about ways to maximize the value of the different boss relics, you have to weigh the value of the different relics appropriately. So if I had a decision which I thought made me 60... Let's say that I have 65% chance to win a run if I get Runic Pyramid, and I have a 50% chance to win a run if I get Fusion Hammer in the current situation I'm in. These are just numbers I made up. Runic Pyramid is better than Fusion Hammer. Probably in a more typical situation, Runic Pyramid would be like substantially more than 65%, but whatever. They're numbers I made up. Let's say that I have this decision, and I think if I take a certain card, my chance to win the run if I get Runic Pyramid will go down substantially. Like it'll go from 65% to 60%, say. Whereas if I take it, my chance to win the run with Fusion Hammer, if I got offered Fusion Hammer, would go up substantially. Like it would go from 50% to 55%. If the boss relic that I got were completely random, like I had no choice about what I was taking, I would be ambivalent about which of those I chose. Like I would be losing 5% win rate with Runic Pyramid and gaining 5% win rate with Fusion Hammer, and since they're both equally likely, I don't like care either way whether I do that. Like sure, why not? Who cares? In terms of my win rate, this doesn't matter. It could come down to like preference or play style or whatever at that point. But that isn't what actually happens. What actually happens is you get offered 3 relics and choose the one that's best. And so because of that, you have to be valuing the things which make the boss relics which are better, more than the things which make the boss relics which are worse, better. Because it doesn't really matter if I make a decision which makes Fusion Hammer better, if I get offered Fusion Hammer and Runic Pyramid at the same time and take Runic Pyramid, and so I don't have Fusion Hammer. Like, okay, cool. I made a choice in Act 1 which makes Fusion Hammer better, but I was unlikely to take it anyway, so who cares, right? Because of that, a lot of the time that I'm thinking about decisions in light of which boss relics I might get, I'm thinking specifically about Pandora's box, Runic Pyramid, and to a much lesser extent, Snecko. Pandora's box and Runic Pyramid, because they are, in my opinion, the highest win rate boss relics. I think they're just both very, 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 very strong at the end of Act 1. And Snecko, because, in my opinion, it is like the swingiest boss relic. Like 1 or 2 decisions can massively change the value of a Snecko. And so just adding one card to my deck might change Snecko from completely unplayable to actually getting through Act 2 pretty comfortably. And that's something to keep an eye on. Those are kind of like the main ones that I'm paying attention to, but I'm also thinking about a ton of other stuff. And that's what this spreadsheet in this video is about, is like, what other things am I thinking about in order to like get small edges where, okay, I didn't want to take this boss relic in particular, but since it might happen, I'm going to do this thing slightly differently so that if it happens, I'll have a better chance to win the run. Okay, anyway, let's start. Astrolabe. Astrolabe's just a like very solid relic. It's also not a relic that you have to think that hard about in terms of utilizing. I think maybe the one thing I can say about Astrolabe maybe is it rewards you for understanding how to utilize different upgraded cards. So if you have like a very linear idea of how to win on a character, if you think the only way to win on defect is to build orbs, or the only way to win on Watcher is to stance swap, or something like that, Astrolabe's not going to be as good as you because you're getting 3 random upgraded cards, and there's no guarantee that they fit into that strategy that you're going for. Astrolabe's more beneficial, though, if you're expecting to be able to put together some sort of winning strategy based around any 3 upgraded cards, or at least more 3 random upgraded cards, which means understanding what the cards can do and just kind of getting better at doing different things on the character. So Astrolabe kind of just rewards you for being better at the game. Sure. But in terms of decision making in Act 1, doesn't change that much. It slightly wants you to build a thinner deck so that you have more ability to draw the upgraded cards once they're in your deck, but like it's not that large an effect. It's not really enough to be like stopping me from adding a card that I think is good in particular. And you can even argue that there's a counterbalance where having a slightly larger deck lowers the variance involved in taking an Astrolabe and makes it so you can win a run even if your 3 upgraded cards are bad. Or it can keep you going if your 3 upgraded cards are like good for late game but not good for Act 2, to have like a large structure of your deck in place that is good for Act 2 already, that kind of thing. Black Star. Black Star is another one which is kind of like, if you get good at the game, this boss relic becomes good. You want to be able to kill Act 2 elites to be able to take Black Star, which is a difficult thing to be able to do. So I said the difficulty of this was high, but also you just want to be able to kill Act 2 elites anyway. And the better you get at the game, the easier that becomes. I suspect, this was my personal experience at least, as I was getting better at the game, Act 2 elites were not a thing I was necessarily prioritizing killing. I was often thinking like, I might try to fight one Act 2 elite and use my potions well to get through the fight. But, you know, probably the Act 2 elite's going to require potions to kill, so I'm not going to think like, oh, I'll kill 3 or 4 Act 2 elites because I won't have enough potions for that. I'm not going to try to build my deck for that. That just seems wasteful, etc., etc., etc. As you get better at the game, you start understanding more and more like, how do you get the output required to beat the different Act 2 elite fights without massive investment in cards and stuff like that. And you also start to get better at understanding, like, if I do invest some cards into beating the Act 2 elite fights, how can I then turn my deck into something that wins late game despite the fact that I've maybe put 4 or 5 cards for Act 2 elite fights into it? Which takes a while. But eventually you do get to a point where you understand how to do that, and when that happens, you start being able to take Black Star pretty frequently. And yeah, you're kind of hoping to be able to take Black Star every time it's offered. It's not going to be the highest win rate relic for you. One, because it doesn't actually help you beat the Act 2 elites itself. And 2, because there are some other relics in here that are just very, very, very strong, like stronger than the extra relics that you're getting out of Black Star, even if it works perfectly. But yeah, it can be fine. I think Black Star is like a middling to slightly above middling relic, maybe. Busted Crown. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about how to maximize Busted Crown because I almost never want to take Busted Crown. This is just like not a good relic. As a thought exercise, I think a lot of people might think like, oh, what if I got like the face that gives me 50 gold every time I went to a question mark? And maybe I could get Singing Bowls so that I can get +2 max HP from my card rewards, even though I didn't get a card. And I could get like a membership card, and then I could get a courier, and I could go to shops to get lots of stuff. That's cool. All right, sure, whatever. If you get all of those things, you probably still just don't want to take Busted Crown because it's a card game. And so you'd like to get card rewards so you can build your deck, which will allow you to win. Yeah, like it's just like, why are you getting +1 energy per turn? Which isn't that good, by the way. This is just like a general thing to say, is that +1 energy per turn is not that good a thing in this game anyway. And as you get better at the game, you start to understand more and more how you can get something better than +1 energy per turn. But anyway, like, why are you getting +1 energy per turn and making it so you see, I don't know, like 30, 40 fewer cards over the course of the run? Like, what are you going to spend the energy on? You didn't see 30 or 40 cards you could have spent the energy on. Wouldn't it have been better to see those? So, Busted Crown's just kind of terrible. Calling Bell. Calling Bell, I do not actually tend to build around very often, which I think is kind of interesting, because maybe I should be. I'll give this one like a yellow tier. So Calling Bell has some comparison here to Astrolabe. Like a lot of the things that I said about Astrolabe, you can say about Calling Bell too. The better you get at working out how to use 3 different relics to win yourself the run, the better Calling Bell is going to be, etc., etc., etc. It does reward you for putting a few more cards into your deck in Act 1 to lessen the effect of putting a curse in your deck. You want to draw the curse less often, right? I think the reason that I don't tend to like Calling Bell that often is it's less uniformly positive than Astrolabe. You can definitely get Calling Bells, which are worse than just never having taken the Calling Bell. Like, putting a curse in your deck is quite bad, and relics are good, but there are bad relics, and you can get them. Whereas with Astrolabe, like, it's very hard to transform a strike into a card that's worse than strike. It just doesn't happen very often. If you're transforming a strike and getting an upgraded card, and you think that that upgraded card is worse than strike, it's more likely that you just don't understand what to do with that upgraded card than it is that the card's actually worse than strike. So there's that part of it. And then there's also, I tend to anchor around strategies which like card reward, and I tend to prioritize in late game strategies which minimize chances of drawing dead hands. So, let me expand that a little bit. Strategies which build around... Did I say card rewards? Strategies which build around like trying to go infinite is what I was trying to say. Or trying to like build an engine, maybe? Maybe not trying to go infinite necessarily. But like having a curse in your deck just makes it that much harder to set up an infinite with Sundial. It also makes it that much harder to like pair Nightmare with Footwork or something like that. There are just a lot of things that I want to do in this game which require me to draw certain cards to play them, and so losing the ability to do that by adding a curse to my deck and drawing the curse instead is pretty painful to me. Maybe a better way to say it is that I like anchor on card draw based strategies. And so putting a curse in your deck is kind of like getting -1 card draw per deck cycle. And that's a very painful drawback in my eyes. Yeah. I don't know. I think I was going to say something else about that too, but I like haven't slept very well and don't remember what it was. So that's what you get. Coffee Dripper. Coffee Dripper is like okay. Coffee Dripper is like a slightly better then I'll give it this blue. It's a slightly better than yellow, for sure. Coffee Dripper's fairly straightforward, I want to say. Like, it's good if you have a reason to spend 4 energy per turn and you have some sustain relics so that you don't have to rest at campfires. The place that I would caution you against is trying to take Coffee Dripper and then playing Act 2 more safely to not take damage. I think probably it's better to take a different relic beyond 3 energy per turn and rest at campfires than to do that. Coffee Dripper also, like resting is just pretty good at campfires, so it has a very real drawback, and the way that you are forced to play if you don't have good sustain relics and don't have a deck which can get through fights without taking damage in order to justify taking Coffee Dripper is pretty painful and like does make you lose runs. I think this is like Coffee Dripper is like a pretty middling win rate boss relic in my opinion. Cursed Key. I'm gonna give Cursed Key the same color as Coffee Dripper. I think these are 2 relics which are like, they're both pretty common to take, but they're not that strong. But they kind of like work with the median deck, like the deck with 2.5 kids and a car and a white picket fence or whatever. Doesn't mind having a 4th energy per turn, and these drawbacks are manageable drawbacks for it. So in a lot of pick 1 of 3s for boss relics at the end of Act 1, like one of these 2 is the best thing you can take. However, they're just like not that strong. They're just kind of okay. Anyway, for Curse Key, again, you want to have a higher energy curve to justify taking a drawback for a 4th energy every turn. If your 4th energy every turn is like only playing you a strike or something like that, there are just a lot of other things you can do in this game that are stronger than that. So it's a good idea to be looking for stuff that's stronger than that. Yeah. Curse Key likes having Omamori. It also likes having a lower requirement for card removal because you're likely to need to remove 1 extra curse over the course of the run, which can be a pretty big deal. Drawing your cards is a big deal. Getting to the card that you need to play to win the fight 1 turn slower can lose you the run pretty easily. So strategies which have less card removal requirement are typically going to be strategies which end up with larger deck sizes. So that could be in a run where you have eggs, so you're being offered upgraded cards, you're more likely to take lots of cards. It could be in runs where you are going to more hallway fights than usual, like you have a meat on the bone or something like that, so you're going to be going to lots of floors with card rewards, giving you more chances to be offered cards and then take cards. Often strategies like this are going to be focused on building some combination of cards which only need to be drawn and played once, like powers, like defect scaling up orbs with defragments and stuff like that. Ironclad putting together like Dark Embrace, Corruption, Feel No Pain, Barricade or something like that. Once it's drawn those cards, it just wins, and it's okay that the deck has 40 cards in it or whatever because you only have to draw them once. Whereas other decks which are like trying to draw and play cards multiple times, like trying to set up a Blade Dance finisher sort of thing or something like that, dislike having a curse in their hand quite a bit more. Anyway, that's something to like pay attention to and think about, but in general with Coffee Dripper and Curse Key, usually the end of Act 1 isn't early enough for the run to have deviated enough that you can like obviously not take these, and so they do end up getting taken a decent amount of the time. Ectoplasm, you like kind of can't take this. Gold is just too good. Also, +1 energy per turn just isn't good enough. So it's very unusual to have to take Ectoplasm. Occasionally you'll have a deck which like had to take some mediocre commons which cost 2 in order to get through Act 1, and then your boss relic choices are just not good, and it's like, well, Ectoplasm's the only way I can not die in the next 6 floors, so I guess I'm taking it. And like typically in a run like that, you will then lose like toward the end of Act 3 or in Act 4 instead, because you have like a much, much weaker deck because you didn't get to spend 1,000 gold or whatever. So that's typically how Ectoplasm works. Empty Cage is fine. I think Empty Cage is like quite good. I'm gonna leave it this blue. This blue will be the quite good color. The way to benefit the most from Empty Cage is to take good cards and upgrade them in Act 1, such that you can then like win in Act 2 by drawing those cards faster because you have 2 fewer dead cards in your deck. Some examples, like if you got a Whirlwind and an Akabeko, getting rid of 2 cards, you can draw that Whirlwind and just kill all the enemies with your Akabeko. Kind of nice. Crippling Cloud plus to a lesser extent. Electrodynamics, actually kind of to a lesser extent. Electrodynamics is like a great card, but Whirlwind plus Akabeko is a very strong example of a card plus relic interaction. So Empty Cage is typically going to be something that I'm picking if I can see that my deck is already containing a strategy which is justifying me spending my boss relic on making that strategy happen a little bit faster in fights. Once you have the 2 card removes, any strategy that you build from then on is going to be more accessible immediately. And it's just like pretty good. My cat's being kind of a brat right now. Hopefully he will leave me alone. Fusion Hammer. Fusion Hammer is somewhat substantially different value on different characters. I think like on Ironclad in particular, Fusion Hammer tends to be quite a bit more playable than on other characters. I'm still going to give it like a yellow though. I have no like key for what the different tier colors actually mean, but yellow is like not great. The thing about Fusion Hammer is, there are 2 things about Fusion Hammer. One, resting's good in like the grindy middling runs. The runs where you're like the like 30th percentile runs or something. The runs which are still winnable but are really struggling a lot. But there are an awful lot of runs that are a bit better than that, which are not guaranteed to win, but don't have to rest that much. And in all of those runs, like the way that you're going to win is likely to be somewhat tied to upgrading a few really good cards, which will win you the run. Like upgrading your defragment so that you got +1 focus for the boss gauntlet, or upgrading your Wraith form so you have another turn of intangible, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, like because of that, just like on aggregate, usually Fusion Hammer is not that good. There are a few specific runs where it's like, well, I'm probably having to rest anyway in Act 2, and a 4th energy would let me get through some fights. So yeah, Fusion Hammer seems okay here. And then there are the runs where the inability to upgrade doesn't matter as much, and those are pretty heavily focused on Ironclad with Armaments Plus. Ironclad just doesn't need upgrades on cards as much as other characters to begin with, and then also has access to Armaments Plus. So this is like one of the first instances I can think of where like a very specific game action is tied to the existence of this relic. I will, with some frequency, upgrade armaments in Act 1 specifically because Fusion Hammer exists. If I have upgraded armaments, I can suddenly profitably take Fusion Hammer and Ironclad where I couldn't otherwise, and so that gives me like a fairly substantial boost to my overall chance to win the run. But yeah, it's still not like every time, because there are a bunch of Ironclad runs where even if I have armaments and I'm in Act 1, like I still don't really want to take Fusion Hammer very much. I'd rather just upgrade a different card. I would caution against like over-indexing on that, I guess. And then there are the runs with Apotheosis, where like, okay, yeah, you're actually like genuinely not getting that much out of upgrades if you have an Apotheosis in your deck already. Especially if it's bottled. That's kind of like the dream scenario for Fusion Hammer, I guess. But those runs aren't that common, and if you are of the opinion that Hammer is a very good boss relic, I would invite you to think about how easy it is to upgrade a card to cost 1 less energy in this game, and like realistically, like how likely it is that getting 1 extra energy per turn is better than just having your best cards cost 1 less energy each. Like, if you want to put Corruption and Barricade and Dark Embrace in play, those cards unupgraded cost 8 energy, and if you draw them all on the same turn, like you can have 4 energy that turn, but it's going to be very hard to play more than one of them. Whereas if you upgrade them all, now they only cost 5 energy, and so you could like get all of those in play on turn 1 with the help of like 1 offering, even if you are starting with 3 energy per turn. Yeah, very easy for upgrades to be worth quite a lot in this game. Pandora's Box. Pandora's Box, definitely one of the strongest boss relics in the game. There was a time when the game was substantially easier for starters. You could actually be playing strikes sometimes at the end of the game and it was fine. Kind of levels of easier. I mean, you can still play strikes at the end of the game if you want, but yeah. And we were worse at the game, so we didn't understand that there were things you could do that were better than playing your basic cards. Defends as well. Like, there was a time when Kunai plus Defend on Silent was like one of the strongest things you could conceivably do in the boss gauntlet, and now a combination of the cards being improved and us getting better at the game means that we now understand that we could instead like Nightmare a Wraith form and just be invincible for 12 turns. Wraith form used to deal 5 damage whenever you played a skill. Wraith form didn't used to make you invincible for 3 turns, so you know, the game changes. Yeah, but anyway, nowadays, we are not playing our basics at the end of the game as much as we used to be, and the cards that you are transforming into are better on average than they used to be. So transforming into a Wraith form with Pandora's Box is a lot better if Wraith form makes you invincible for 3 turns than if it deals 5 damage every time you play a skill. To a random enemy, not to every enemy. Wraith form was not very good back in the day. Still cost 3 too. Yeah, Pandora's Box is very strong. I am typically clicking on this relic unless Runic Pyramid is offered to me and the Runic Pyramid's good. Like, I will take this over Runic Pyramid if my Runic Pyramid doesn't seem very good. This is a very, very strong relic, in my opinion. It obviously rewards you for having a good understanding of how to use lots of different cards to win the game. So the better you get at the game, the better Pandora's Box is going to be for you. The interesting thing that Pandora's Box does, and because it's such a commonly picked relic for me, it does have like a fairly large effect on my decision making. Because I am picking this like 1 time in 8, 1 time in 7, something like that. Not every time it's offered, but like a lot of the time it's offered. It means that you care less about card removes in Act 1, Pandora's Box. So card remove's like a pretty good game action. Getting rid of strikes, usually good. Getting rid of defends, sometimes quite good as well. Sometimes even better than getting rid of strikes, in fact. But it's not that good at the start of Act 1 because your strikes are good against Gremlin Knob. And there's like this really very large inflection point in Act 1 where your deck goes from taking 3 turns to kill Gremlin Knob to taking 2 turns to kill Gremlin Knob, or from taking 4 turns to kill Gremlin Knob to taking 3 turns to kill Gremlin Knob, I should say. Where all of a sudden you take like on average 10 damage less from elite fights when that happens, or something like that, which is a lot less damage. That's the difference between not being able to kill elites in Act 1 and being able to kill 4 elites in Act 1, kinda. So yeah, it's like not necessarily incredible to remove strikes at the beginning of Act 1, and then toward the end of Act 1, like you're not getting as much mileage out of that card remove before your first chance to be offered Pandora's box. So if I remove a card 3 floors before the boss or whatever, I only have 3 floors worth of value on that before my boss relics show up, and I may be offered Pandora's box, and all of a sudden I'm kind of wishing that I hadn't removed that strike. So at the beginning of Act 1, removing a strike's a little bit iffy because you do want more damage in your deck, but at least you're getting like a good 10 floors of value or something out of having one less strike in your deck and being able to, draw your other cards better or what have you. Then toward the end of the act, like removing strike starts to become a thing that's much more desirable to do, because at that point strike is probably a pretty bad card for you, but you have less time before you see Pandora's box. So the existence of Pandora's box actually like tilts heavily away from card remove in Act 1, which is fascinating because I still card remove a hell of a lot in Act 1. It's a really good game action. I am not saying you shouldn't card remove in Act 1. I'm just saying, like, when choosing between, like, remove a card or buy a really good card that's useful for you right now, one of the reasons that you might, like, tie break toward buying the card instead of card removing is the fact that Pandora's box exists, and recognizing that, like, can tilt your decision a little bit further in one way. If I was playing, like, a modded version of the game where Pandora's box didn't exist, I would be removing cards more heavily in Act 1. Philostone. Philostone's like okay. I think it's probably, I don't know, it's probably a yellow. The enemies get +1 strength, but you get +1 energy per turn. The thing about Philosopher's Stone is it's like okay in a fair run. Like if you're playing knifey blocky against the enemies and like blocking their attacks with your shield and hitting them with your sword, Philosopher's Stone like kind of breaks even. It's like kind of fine. Like sure, they hit you a bit harder, but you get to hit them a bit more because you have a 4th energy every turn. That's fine. But you don't really want to do that. You kind of want to like do something stronger than that in Slay the Spire, and there are a lot of things which are a lot stronger than that which you can do. And ironically, when you're doing those stronger things, Philosopher's Stone's drawback is the least relevant. Because if you're like going invincible for 12 turns, or what have you, then who cares if they're attacking for 1 more damage? It just doesn't matter. If you are abusing feed to have 250 max HP this run, then it probably doesn't matter that much that they're attacking you for 1 more, you know? The broken stuff in this game doesn't care very much about the downside of Philosopher's Stone. But, unfortunately, the broken stuff in this game also doesn't care about having +1 energy per turn. And so Philosopher's Stone manages to be, like, kind of inoffensive if you're not doing anything very exciting, but also kind of inoffensive and unappealing if you are doing something exciting, and just kind of overall, like, I don't know. I very rarely end up taking Philosopher's Stone just because I'm usually going to take something which I think helps me win, whereas often with Philosopher's Stone, I just kind of feel like it's not doing almost anything. Yeah. Runic Dome. Misconception with Runic Dome. A lot of people think that like if you are really good at the game, Runic Dome makes it so you can't see what the enemies are doing. But if you're really good at the game, you just know what the enemies are doing anyway, so you know it doesn't matter. That's just not true. A lot of the enemies have like mixed strategies where they'll do something 30% of the time and something else 70% of the time or whatever. And it's actually like very immediately measurable if you're good at the game. Like, oh, because I have Runic Dome, I am taking on average an extra 10 damage in this fight right now, or something like that. You just run those situations straight away as soon as you've taken Runic Dome. If you like look at the enemy AI and compare it to the hand cards you have in hand and your decision about what to do and whatever. That said, Runic Dome's upside, I think, actually does nicely commingle with this downside. like the same decks which can benefit from its upside are also able to negate its downside fairly well. Runic Dome is like good in fairish decks which are like playing Shrug It Off and Backflip and stuff. Like Runic Dome's okay if you have a deck which is anchored around like Shrug It Off and Flame Barrier and Combust and Body Slam or something. Like you're just kind of going to be blocking every turn and the enemies are going to die eventually. Silent decks can do this too with like Backflip and Blur and like Noxious Fumes or Caltrops or Deadly Poison, like whatever. You can have a Relic that deals damage, whatever. Runic Dome tends to actually do pretty well in those sorts of decks where like the deck isn't doing anything super extremely powerful. It's just kind of like making enough output to survive every turn, and the enemies are kind of dying incidentally for some reason. And a deck like that might want to have like a Whirlwind Plus or something like that in order to get through elite fights where like, okay, I'm not going to be able to like just outblock the Book of Stabbing, so I'm going to have to actually deal damage to it with, you know, some sort of damage card. Having a 4th energy per turn to actually play that damage card can be pretty relevant. So Runic Dome has a use case, but it also has a like very heavy downside, like always, including during that use case, but even more so outside that use case. Yeah. And the use case that it has isn't very strong, is the other thing. Like that's not really the deck that you like want to be building. You don't really like want to be playing Shrug It Off a bunch on Ironclad. You just like want to be going infinite on turn 1, or like playing Entrench and Barricade, or playing like Corruption and Dark Embrace, or something like that. So yeah, Runic Dome, like it has some moments, and there's definitely like a sort of thing which does pretty well with it, but that's not really the thing that you want to be aiming for. Runic Pyramid's obscene. Runic Pyramid's very much a decision warping relic. It's another one of the relics where like I'm taking this almost every time it's offered at the end of Act 1, so that's definitely frequently enough to change some decision making for me during Act 1. I can point to like the year of my life playing Slay the Spire where the game balance changed enough that Runic Pyramid was stronger than Snecko, like generally, like most of the time, and a huge amount of how I played Act 1 changed because the cards that Snecko wants are very different from the cards which Runic Pyramid wants. Runic Pyramid wants like Anger, whereas Snecko wants Bludgeon, and they're incredibly different cards, right? And so like it took a substantial amount of time for me to like work through all 4 characters, being like, okay, well, this character like isn't going to take Perfected Strike because Perfected Strike doesn't work super well with Runic Pyramid. Instead, we're going to have to deal damage with a different card somehow. So how are we going to like work that into our strategy? And then like slowly you get into like, okay, Anger is really good. We're gonna like try to make Reckless Charge work, which is gonna make Dark Embrace better, and like evolves a bit better as an early pick because Reckless Charge is happening, and like Wild Strike and Hemokinesis are going to be 1-cost ways to deal a bunch of damage, and etc. Huge amount of recalibration. But anyway, yeah, Runic Pyramid's really good. A decent amount. Okay, like Pandora's Box is the other relic I've said, which is like comparable power level, right? Pandora's Box isn't something I can really like build around. Like I click on it and I get a bunch of cards which are generally obscenely powerful and win me the game. But I didn't like build something leading up to that in particular to make it better. The one thing you can do for that with Pandora's Box is like take a couple of good block cards, like a Leg Sweep or a Flame Barrier, like a Glacier, because removing all of your defense and having no guarantee of getting a good block card can be pretty rough. That's like the one thing that I will kind of do if I'm thinking about Pandora's Box. But honestly, Pandora's Box is so strong that like typically I don't expect to have to have made those sorts of concessions in Act 1 in order to get it. Like, I mean, like Leg Sweep's an okay card. I might take it anyway, but I'm not thinking like, oh, I'll lose unless I have a leg sweep when I click on Pandora's box. I'm like thinking, if I get offered Pandora's box, I'm sure gonna win. um, yeah. With Runic Pyramid though, Runic Pyramid is not only like you are going to have to win using the cards you've actually taken, but also it's like if you don't play the cards you've taken, they are stuck in your hand and you have to see them again next turn. And also they're going to stop you from drawing the other cards. So Runic Pyramid like actually heavily requires you to be building your deck in a way that is actively good with Runic Pyramid. And if you do that, you win like 100-ish% of your runs when you get offered Runic Pyramid, which is great. And, you know, plenty of reason to do it. Not actually 100%, but like a deck which would like to be offered Runic Pyramid, getting offered Runic Pyramid is a very surefire way to win a run of Slay the Spire, in my experience. And so, yeah, I'm definitely thinking about lower cost cards to make Runic Pyramid good. I'm definitely thinking about cards which can be good if you draw them on the right turn, but aren't good all the time. Something like Piercing Whale goes up in value because of Runic Pyramid being good. Something like Boot Sequence on Defect, like it's in your opening hand and blocks for 10, but what if you don't need to block for 10 in your opening hand? Well, with Runic Pyramid, you can just block for 10 on your second turn instead. Cool. Boot Sequence you can also solve with Hologram as an aside. Anyway, yeah. Runic Pyramid is really strong. So, cool. Sacred Bark. Sacred Bark I do not take very often. It is possible that I'm just like not that good at using potions. I think it's more likely that potions just aren't that good. I would typically rather go for a strategy which is winning endgame without needing to double any potions, and I don't think it's that hard to achieve it. Sacred Bark is a relic which lives in this very middling place where like there are runs which will win with Sacred Bark which would not win without Sacred Bark, but they're not very good runs. Like those decks aren't very good. Right? Like generally my relics that I'm excited about are the relics which let me build a deck which is really good, and then I win. And I don't need potions very much. If I am using potions, it's usually to like effectively give myself more max HP because my deck might take a few turns to get rolling, and you know the enemies can attack you for 60 damage by turn 3 in Act 4 very easily. So yeah, but Sacred Bark I'm not super excited about. Where I will think about Sacred Bark at all is going into the end of Act 1. I might discard a potion which doesn't double well with Sacred Bark in favor of a potion which does double well with Sacred Bark. But this isn't a very frequent thing that I do. And the reason it's not frequent is simply that I don't take Sacred Bark that often. And so if I'm choosing between a potion which doubles well with Sacred Bark, like say Fire Potion, and a potion which doesn't double well with Sacred Bark, like Gambler's Brew, for example, if I took Sacred Bark frequently, then I might prefer the Fire Potion more often. But since I like rarely take Sacred Bark at all, like I'll look at it and I'll be like, well, the Fire Potion would be better if I got Sacred Bark probably, but I'm not going to take it anyway, so Just saying it though, because if you are finding that you like Sacred Bark and take it frequently, you should be thinking about potions toward the end of Act 1 and thinking like, okay, between these two potions, this one's better with Sacred Bark. So, you know, since they seem like they're close-ish in value, I'm going to take the one that's better with Sacred Bark. Slaver's Collar. Again, this is another, like, this is just isn't that great. I'm gonna say Sacred Bark's even worse. The places where Sacred Bark is good that I do like are the places where it gives a ton of dexterity or focus or something like that, or an extra turn of intangible. Like there are some potions which are very strong, and there are some decks which get a lot out of those potions potentially, and boss relics aren't actually that good. So if you're getting another turn of intangible out of your boss relic and that's all you get out of it for the entire run, like That's actually better than some of the other boss relics. So it's like not that bad. But yeah, I don't know. I don't use Sacred Bark super often. The issue with Slaver's Collar, which I do take sometimes, Slaver's Collar, sometimes you have to take it, you get +1 energy per turn, but only for elite and boss fights. More common for me to take this at the end of Act 2 than the end of Act 1, because at the end of Act 2, I have to start getting ready for the boss gauntlet, where I fight a boss fight, an elite fight, and a boss fight in a row. Slaver's Collar makes an energy per turn in all of those, so, you know. Yeah. End of Act 2, also more likely that I'm already like good enough at hallway fights to not need any more help with those. But at the end of Act 1, Slaver's Collar is pretty rough. Act 2 hallway fights are pretty hard, and they also aren't necessarily solved in the same way that Act 2 elite fights are solved. Act 2 elite fights are solved with area of effect damage and strength down stuff. Like very generally. Like large amounts of block, potions, area of effect stuff like Immolate or Whirlwind, and strength down stuff like Disarm, Piercing Wow. Stuff like that solves Act 2 elite fights very nicely. Stuff like that does not necessarily actually do that well in Act 2 hallway fights. And so elite fights give you a relic and give you a higher chance of uncommons and rares. So you'd rather be fighting the elites than the hallways. And so you're probably going to build your deck to be better at fighting the elites instead of building it to be better at fighting the hallways, right? Sure. But the hallways are guaranteed to be there. Like you're going to have to fight some hallways to get through Act 2. And your deck, which can fight elites, is not necessarily actually getting through all of the Act 2 hallway fights super well. Act 2 hallway fights more reward, like, strangely, they kind of reward some scaling damage. Like, there are some Act 2 hallway fight enemies who have quite a lot of health and weaken you, for example. They reward being able to block for, like, 20 in a turn, which like isn't something that the elite fights care about that much. The elite fights kind of care about being able to block for like either 30 to 40 or you don't have to block. Like these are kind of the two things. Also because you can afford to take damage in elite fights anyway, right? If you're getting attacked for 20 in an elite fight and you don't block and you take 20 damage from the elite fight, like that's kind of okay because you got a relic. Whereas if that happens in a hallway fight, it's kind of a disaster. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is like Slaver's Collar probably isn't helping your deck very much going into Act 2 if you're building it the way I'm building it, at least. And the other problem is, again, you have this like miscommunication between the Relic's upside and the Relic's downside, where being better at elite fights without getting better at hallway fights runs into this problem where you want to go to hallway fights and elite fights with decks which want to take elite fights. Like, if your deck is taking elite fights, you probably want to be going to hallway fights, not question marks. If your deck's not taking elite fights very much, you probably want to be going to question marks and shops quite a lot. If you're going to elite fights, you're going to be getting offered more uncommons and rares, which means you're going to be building a larger deck, which is going to benefit from the other card rewards too. Whereas if you're not going to elite fights, you're not going to be getting offered those great cards, so you're going to probably be trying to build a deck which is more centered around very few cards, like, and then upgrading them. So like build an infinite, which has like 4 upgraded cards building toward that infinite happening, or something like that. Excuse me. Yeah, but if you have a deck which can fight elites, you probably want to also be fighting hallways with it. You want to get more card rewards. When you go to the hallway fights, you'll get offered commons, which will raise your rare chance for the elite fights. So as you go through the act, if you're trying to generate rares out of elite fights, you want to like go to lots of hallway fights to get more rare chance. Yeah. Not a huge fan of Slaver's Collar. Snecko. Snecko is like okay. I think Snecko at this point in my Slay the Spire gameplay has fallen to Coffee Dripper Curse Key kind of tier. The way that you make Snecko good, and here's the thing. While I just said it was like in this tier, these are relics I take quite often and they're moderately good. This is a relic I take sometimes and it's very good when I take it, kind of more so. But the reason is that like just a few decisions in Act 1 can make it so that your Snecko is very good. The problem is a lot of those decisions are directly against making Runic Pyramid very good. And I would much rather have my Runic Pyramid be good than my Snecko be good, because Snecko kinda caps on late game win rate. It's pretty hard to push Snecko above like 70% late game win rate, in my experience. You limit the card pool pretty heavily. There are a bunch of 0 cost cards, which would be great if they cost 0, but when they are randomized between 0 cost and 3 cost, they're suddenly terrible. So you're adding a lot of variance to your card rewards, like whether they're valuable or not, by making a bunch of them have no value, while other ones have more value, like something like a bludgeon is suddenly better than it would be otherwise. But putting that much variance into 2 acts of card rewards can definitely result in you losing a run where you would have won if the card rewards had less variance, in my experience. I think as I've got better at the game, I've gotten better at like taking card rewards with normal variance and building a deck that wins out of them like almost always, because like I've gotten good enough at the game to manage that amount of variance. Whereas with Snecko level of variance, there are definitely runs I play with Snecko where it's like, oh, I just kind of didn't get offered shit that worked there. In terms of like within the fights, like you can draw a hand which only has 3 cost cards, etc., etc. That's like whatever. Like, yeah, it's true, but it doesn't actually happen that much, and you're getting +2 cards drawn per turn as well, so you know, you can also draw 5 cards and have none of them be relevant, where drawing 7 gives you more shots to draw a relevant card. I think people who are like put off by Snecko because of the variance involved in it are probably seeing that their deck isn't built very well for Snecko and so it's performing very inconsistently and poorly, and mistaking that for Snecko having a lot of variance, when actually what's happened is like they haven't put the right cards in their deck for Snecko to work. Which, yeah, I mean, increasingly I don't do that either because I'm not taking Snecko. So Snecko is something that you do kind of have to have in mind in Act 1, and like Snecko wanting to take Snecko at the end of Act 1 is going to inform which commons you choose and stuff like that. Whether you choose a Perfected Strike or a Cleave or something like that, I don't know. Like, small decisions can change based on how much you'd like to take Snecko if it's offered to you. Yeah, but the way that Snecko actually does have a lot of variance, which can kill your run, because it still does, is that all of a sudden it basically like breaks the balance of the cards, right? When you look at a card reward, instead of being offered 3 cards which are all playable, you'll be offered like 2 cards which are unplayable because they cost 1.5 on average, where usually they would cost 0 and be reasonable at that cost. And then 1 card, which is like just broken because usually it would cost 3, but now it's costing 1.5 on average. And yeah, breaking the balance of the card rewards does make it so sometimes you lose because the game is unbalanced. The places I find myself with Snecko and being really happy about it are like, obviously if I transform into something that's great with Snecko, that'll happen. Meteor Strike lines with Defect in Act 1 can happen. They're very strong with Snecko, but also Meteor Strike is actually just a strong enough card to take and win without Snecko. Like, if you have a charge battery and a 4th energy relic, you can play Meteor Strike often enough for it to actually be pretty good. And it's such a strong card that it can be a curse in your deck, unless you have a potion for a boss or elite fight, and still be worth having. like a liquid memories to get you through an Act 2 elite fight can be enough to justify taking a Meteor Strike. Yeah, so there are some of those, but the situations where Snecko is like typically really strong for me are where I find a card which is good with Runic Pyramid and Snecko, and that becomes a centerpiece of my deck. Fiendfire was the one I could think of most easily. Fiendfire is very good with Runic Pyramid because you can fill your hand, and so it will be hitting for the full 9 cards. Also, it helps with one of the drawbacks of Pyramid, which is that you can get a bunch of mediocre cards stuck in your hand, especially true at the beginning of Act 2 with Runic Pyramid, where like you only have 3 energy and you haven't removed that many of your basics yet, right? Fiendfire is also very good with Snecko because it costs less and you're drawing +2 cards per turn. So if I have a Fiendfire and I get offered a Snecko, like, yeah, pretty likely that that's making it into the deck. There are also just some other cards which are very, very strong and happen to work really well with Snecko. Echo Form on Defect would be an example. Electrodynamics on Defect is another pretty decent example, I think. There's some cards where it's like, this is such a powerful card, especially for where I'm at in the run, that, you know, getting the chance to draw it faster and making it cost less on average seems worth taking a Snecko. And when that happens, I'm definitely Snecko-ing. I'm gonna raise it up to here. All right, cool. Sozu. It's worth noting maybe, because I feel like I've said it, but I haven't like maybe drawn attention to it. This is all about the end of Act 1. These relics like are all different value at the end of Act 2. I'm only talking about at the end of Act 1 here. I'm not going to try to talk about the end of Act 2 as well. It's very much a different game. All right, Sozu. Sozu used to be like a standard go-to. I feel like Sozu used to be in like the Cursed Key Coffee Dripper sort of tier. Actually, it used to be Cursed Key Sozu, I would say, in this tier, and Coffee Dripper wasn't there. Coffee Dripper was considered very risky, like you have to rest. And then we got better at the game and potions got better and stuff. Sozu is now pretty unpickable. One, your deck doesn't need 4 energy per turn anymore because like it can just win with 3 energy or generate a bunch of energy with cards and stuff like that. So that's 1. 2, the potions are better, so the drawback is much more significant than it used to be. The way that I end up taking a Sozu at the end of Act 1 is if I have good potions for late game already and I have a deck that doesn't need to use potions in Act 2. Which is a lovely situation to be in. To be honest, if you're in that situation at the end of Act 1, you probably win with most relics. So, like, yeah, if I take Sozu, like, chances are pretty decent that I'm going to win, but I'm not taking it very often. It's kind of only being taken in the rare situation where I'm so strong that the downside doesn't matter that much. Because if the downside does matter, like, it's a very bad downside. Potions are good. You're going to get more than 1 energy per turn out of potions if you're using them properly. Excuse me. I've been talking for an hour. Tiny House. I actually take Tiny House, like, I mean, I don't think Tiny House is good. I'm going to put it in probably yellow tier. Maybe it's even worse than that. It's like a low yellow tier. I don't think it's quite red tier. It's worth noting, though, that Tiny House gives you a potion. So if you're getting toward the end of Act 1 and you're wondering, should I buy a potion right now? I have 1 open potion slot. Or you're thinking, should I use a potion in this elite fight to make sure that I get through it safely, or should I try to save them? Well, having an open potion slot makes Tiny House a little bit more valuable because it gives you a potion. So, slight thing. It like comes up just barely often enough that I do consider it, because I do take Tiny House at the end of Act 1 sometimes. Like, it doesn't have a drawback, is the best thing you can really say about Tiny House. The value it gives is relevant too. Like, it gives you a decent chunk of stuff. Velvet Choker is like a catastrophe relic, in my opinion. Velvet Choker is another one, which is like, I used to think this relic was pretty good. The idea being like, you can build a deck that wins late game off of 6 cards per turn, which is true. You can. There are lots of strategies which win late game off of 6 cards per turn. 100%. The issue is it's kind of bad for Relic you take at the end of Act 1 to just delete like 70% of your winning late game strategies. That is a very, 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 very large downside. And, you know, sometimes you'll be angled toward a strategy which only needs to play 6 cards per turn to win late game, and that's cool. Congratulations. There are some runs which can do that. But even if you're angled toward that at the end of Act 1, you probably haven't fully built it yet. And a lot of those strategies can very easily slide into a different strategy which wants to play 6 or more cards per turn. More than 6 cards per turn. Like, for example, say you have like a Wraith form at the end of Act 1, you might think, oh, like, I'm halfway to having Nightmare Wraith form, and if I get Nightmare Wraith form, I don't have to play more than 6 cards per turn, so, like, we're well on our way to doing that, right? But, like, first off, maybe you have a Blade Dance in your deck already, because it's a really strong common. So, if you have a Blade Dance in your deck already, it's already pretty painful to take a Velvet Choker. That's already going to hurt you on some turns. But say, like, you don't even have a Blade Dance, right? Say that you get into Act 2 and you've taken your Velvet Choker and you have your Wraith form and you're like, okay, like, Nightmare's a rare card, so I won't necessarily get offered it, but, like, maybe I'll get offered another Wraith form or something like that. And then maybe you're thinking about the other things you might get offered, and it's like, well, I can take Acrobatics right now. Because even with Velvet Choker, like, Acrobatics isn't going to get me to 6 cards per turn, and it's going to help me to draw my Wraith form faster and stuff like that. So you take an Acrobatics, sure. But that's like, well, now you're being offered, like, Tactician, and all of a sudden, like, maybe you get a Tough Bandages or something like that, and it's like, huh, well, wait a second, like, I have the ability, with the cards being offered to me, to build a late game winning strategy based around, like, spamming a bunch of Acrobatics here, but I can't do it because of my Act 1 boss relic. Instead, I'm stuck here, like, looking for another Wraith form, basically, or a potion that goes with Wraith form to get me through the boss gauntlet, or like a footwork. You're just suddenly, like, extremely limited in how you can actually win. And so, like, yeah, you can win playing 6 or fewer cards per turn. The question is, like, are you good enough at the game to see all of the possible winning lines as you're going through Act 2, such that, like, you're losing out on enough potential where, like, something would have won you the run playing 6 or more cards per turn, but you couldn't do it because of Velvet Choker? Are you good enough at the game that, like, that's happening enough for Velvet Choker to be bad? And, like, I don't actually think it's that difficult to be that good at the game, to be honest. I think Velvet Choker is pretty bad. So, yeah, you can think about, like, the times that Velvet Choker is appealing are very adjacent to the times where Ectoplasm and Fusion Hammer are appealing, in my opinion. They're like the, oh, this deck's kind of bad, I have to take some bad commons, my energy curve's all messed up, I could really use another energy every turn to, like, play this Clothesline Plus that's in my deck or whatever. And I'm a little bit more concerned about dying in Act 2 right now than I am about setting myself to win Act 4. And if you're in that sort of situation, you can take a Velvet Choker, and yeah, I do think there's a decent chunk of overlap in the sorts of decks that want to take Ectoplasm, Fusion Hammer, and Velvet Choker, where it's, like, typically going to be more about the situation you're in going into Act 2, where you're just kind of, like, in disaster zone and nothing better has been offered to you for the situation you're in, than, like, you know, excited about this relic. Alright. There are also class-specific relics. My voice is, like, dying on me. It's kind of a problem. I don't know. I should have, like, grabbed a glass of water while I recorded. Oh well. Black Blood. I have almost never taken Black Blood. Black Blood makes it so instead of healing 6 at the end of each fight, you heal 12 at the end of each fight, I think. Or maybe 10, I don't know. I think I've taken Black Blood when I've had, like, 3 offerings in my deck at the end of Act 1, and basically never else. I don't know. Like, there are just other boss relics which are better than that, in my opinion. That's been my experience. Mark of Pain. Ironclad does not have the best class-specific relics. I've talked a little bit in this video already about how increasingly my strategies are built around like card draw and drawing the right cards and then playing the right cards on the right turns with the right other cards maybe. Putting 2 wounds in my draw pile does not help me achieve that. And so, yeah, Mark of Pain just not very appealing at all. I've had a lot of people express to me that like if you have an evolve, like Mark of Pain should be good, or like since you have evolve, you can take Mark of Pain here or whatever. Evolve doesn't start in play though. Evolve starts in your draw pile, and so like if you have 2 wounds and 1 evolve in your draw pile, like on average, you're going to like draw a wound before you draw evolve or something, right? Something like that. It's weird because the wounds aren't actually put into your draw pile until after you draw your hand tracked one, but still. The only time I'm really excited about Mark of Pain is if I have evolve, have bottled evolve, and have a deck which wants a 4th energy, which like has happened in my life. But even then, I'd like probably rather have a runic pyramid. Like, just like it's not a very good relic. Runic Cube's kind of legit. I'm going to give Runic Cube this color. This is the same color as like Coffee Dripper and Kursky. Runic Cube draws you a card every time you take damage, which is incredibly strong with something like Bloodletting. There are some situations where Runic Cube is very, very, very strong, and those situations happen to overlap pretty well with the difficult parts of the game. Like, Runic Cube is very, very, very strong in the heart fight. That's kind of a good fight for you to have something very strong in. Every time you play a card, you get hit for 2 in the heart fight. Now you draw a card every time that happens. That's pretty good. Bloodletting generates energy and deals damage to you, so with Runic Cube, all of a sudden you have like a mini offering that doesn't have exhaust on it. That's very strong. It's especially strong in harder fights because you don't mind playing that card multiple times. Like, you're okay with taking 10 or 20 damage in a fight like that. So Runic Cube can definitely be okay. I think it's typically pretty obvious when it's good. Like, you have a bloodletting kind of things are going on. And also, I don't take it often enough or with high enough priority for me to be looking at Bloodletting in Act 1 and thinking, I should take this so I can take Runic Cube. That's not a thing that I'm doing as Ironclad. But Runic Cube is really good. And if I have taken up Bloodletting, you know, that will influence my decision on whether or not to take Runic Cube. Runic Cube is really good. Runic Cube can be really good, I should say. The problem with Runic Cube is it isn't that good in like Act 2. Yeah. Your deck isn't put together well enough for you to like play a bunch of bloodlettings. It's not put together well enough to really benefit from like drawing extra cards from getting hit by enemies. And also there aren't that many enemies who are like attacking you for 1x5 or whatever. There aren't many enemies who attack you for 1x5 in the game in general, but like I guess birds in Act 2 do. And then the heart attacks you for like 1x15 plus 2 every time you play a card, right? Something like that. So, yeah. Silent. Ring of the Serpent. Ring of the Serpent, you draw 1 extra card per turn. Sounds like it would be really good with all the stuff we've been saying about liking card draw. But for some reason, this replaces a relic which draws you 2 cards on turn 1. So, what? So like you draw 1 less card on turn 1, and then you draw an extra card on turn 2, so you're like broken even, and then on turn 3 is the first time this relic has actually benefited you. Kind of. That's like doing some rounding. But yeah, like this relic's just kind of bad. Turn 1's very important. There are a lot of fights where turn 1 is the most important turn, and there are a lot of fights where turn 2 is the most important turn, and turn 1 is the only turn you have to set yourself up for that. So, yeah. Wristblade's pretty good. Wristblade only works if you have the right support for it, which, like, it's pretty obvious what that is. Stuff like Blade Dance. if you have to take a slice, like take a slice, I guess. But like usually it's going to be Blade Dance, more so. And there are cards like Backstab and stuff, but like yeah, if you have like 1 or 2 Blade Dances, Risk Blade is already very worth considering going into Act 2 over some very strong other things. It's also pretty obvious when it's not good. Like if you don't have 0 cost attacks, don't take it. This one's pretty straightforward. I guess the other thing to say is sometimes you don't need more damage. And judging whether you need more damage or not is pretty complicated. There are a bunch of inflection points there. It's not like every deck needs the same amount of damage, like because there's an inflection point where like you can get to like, oh, I one-shot the Slavers fight. That's really important and lets me build my deck differently going into Act 3. Where there are other points where it's like, there's no universe where I'm going to manage to one-shot the Slavers fight. I need to build my deck to be able to like survive 2 to 3 turns of being attacked in that fight, which requires very different building. And so like in that latter example, Wristblade might not actually be that good because you're not going to get to a point where you're actually achieving anything with the extra damage anyway. It's kind of like the inflection point with the Gremlin Nub in Act 1, where like if you can kill it before it hits you for 24, that's great, but if you can't, there's no reason to put another attack into your deck that's like a bad card and won't be useful anywhere else, and then like just not be able to kill it anyway and still take the big hit. It's a bit weird because you draw cards randomly, so the inflection points aren't super clean or anything. But yeah, it comes up with stuff like Wristblade. Sometimes you get into runs where you're more and more doubling down on like, okay, I'm going to kill everything before it can hit me, and that's how I'm going to win. And then like you're going to block in the end with like an Incense Burner and a Wraith Form or something, and Wristblade can be kind of nice with that. Whereas other times you're like, no, I don't actually need to try to kill everything really fast. I'm gonna like build an engine which neutralizes the enemies for me and like hit them with an Ice Cream Malaise or a Wraith Form or something, and Nightmare the Wraith Form so that I have extra turns. And in that sort of situation, Wristblade isn't good even if you have Blade Dances. Hovering Kite's like fine. I'm gonna put Hovering Kite at yellow. Like I think it's worse than Coffee Dripper and Cursed Key. The reasons are, 1, it is pretty meaningful that it doesn't give you the energy until after you've played a card which discards a card. You don't always want to play Acrobatics or Dagger Throw or whatever on your turn, even if you draw them. Like sometimes... In fact, I would say like kind of the point of Acrobatics is to let you play other cards. And so sometimes you just draw the other cards you want to play, and then you have like an Acrobatics in hand, which you have to play to get your energy from Hovering Kite, and you're like, well, what is the point? Like I already have my like my footwork and leg sweep in hand. I don't need to play an Acrobatics this turn. It's not doing anything for me. But also because like Silent has a lot of decks which can beat the Heart spending like 9 energy. It doesn't require that much creativity to work out how to do something like play Burst plus, Bouncing Flask plus, Catalyst plus, and then a Nightmare. A Wraith Form. It's just like pretty straightforward. It's right there in the card pool. It doesn't require very many cards. Only one of those cards was rare, and it's honestly not mandatory. So yeah, it's also just like, since this is a silent only relic, Silent just doesn't need energy that much. Yeah. Frozen Core, it's like an inoffensive relic, but I almost never take it. I think it's, I don't know. I haven't, like, I've been putting red on relics which are like actively bad, I think. Mostly. Well, not with Black Blood, I guess. I guess it's kind of comparable to Black Blood, actually. The issue with Frozen Core, which I have taken and won runs because of, is kind of obvious what it's strong with. It generates a Frost Orb at the end of each of your turns. That's strong with having focus, and it's strong with having more orb slots. It only generates the Frost Orb if there's an empty orb slot, so if you have more orb slots and more focus, this goes up in value. That's cool. And having more focus and more orb slots is a way to win as defect, so that's cool too. The issue is if you have more focus and more orb slots, you don't really need this. Like you just like play a glacier. Also, cool-headed is at common and draws you a card while channeling frost orbs. So like you can just put that in your deck, and that can be how you generate your frost orbs. So that's one issue. And then the other issue is that those decks, which are trying to like focus on, forgive the pun, focus on orbs, they really actually kind of like the lightning orb being in play from Cracked Core at the start of your turn one, and Frozen Core replaces it, which makes something like Compile Driver worse or Fission worse, and so on and so forth. So I'm not really thinking about like ways to maximize Frozen Core in my Act 1 because just not a good relic which I want to take. Yeah, that's all there really is to say about that. Inserter's quite strong. Inserter's like this level of strength, in my opinion. I don't know. I could see myself being wrong about that. It might be stronger. Inserter plus focus is just like a winning strategy for a late game, but it's a little bit capped. Kind of similar to Snecko Eye. Like Snecko Eye has a way to win late game, but it's a little bit capped because of card variance. Like it has fewer combination of cards available to it which can win, and so it doesn't reach quite as high a win rate. Inserter is capped in late game for a bit of a different reason. It's not very good at clearing Act 2. And because of that, you can't get as much stuff out of Act 2. And because of that, you don't have quite as much ability to deploy everything quickly on turn 1, 2, and 3, and Inserter itself doesn't do very much on turn 1, 2, or 3. So Defect's like glaring weakness in its strategies centered around focus and orbs is like how to not die before the Vokes and Orbs are all in play. Once you have them all in play, like you should probably be good. Like takes a little bit of strategizing maybe, but probably you should work out how to win once the Focus and Orbs are in play. Probably the issue is like turn 1, 2, and 3. Inserter doesn't do that much on turn 1, 2, and 3. It gives constant output over the course of the fight, but not that much turn 1, 2, or 3. And also, it doesn't really help you like kill slavers in Act 2, which could give you a Horn Cleat. Or give you like a Seek as a rare card reward or something like that. So the issue with Inserter is that sometimes Inserter decks will just die to stuff attacking them at the start of fights, and taking Inserter as your boss relic doesn't really get you set up to change that very aggressively. Nuclear Battery is one of the best boss relics in the game, class specific, so definitely not quite as big a deal as like Pandora's Box and Runic Pyramid, but yeah. Here's the thing. The downside of Nuclear Battery, I think, is meant to be that the orb can get used up, right? So this gives you a Plasma Orb, which gives you 1 energy per turn, but it takes up an orb slot, and eventually, if you channel other orbs, it will get evoked. The thing is, it gives you another 2 energy when it gets evoked. So this like can give you 3 energy on turn 1. That is so much better than 1 energy per turn. And the stuff that gives you 1 energy per turn tends to have a like actual downside attached to it. This isn't an actual downside. It also makes Compile Driver better. It makes Compile Driver draw you 2 cards on turn 1, where this one makes Compile Driver draw you 0 cards on turn 1. A character's commons which draw a card are like very important cards to pay attention to, and yeah, this one makes Compile Driver twice as good, whereas this one makes Compile Driver do nothing when thinking about Compile Driver as the first card played in a fight, and that's kind of a big deal. All right, Holy Water, another incredible relic. I wonder if like part of getting better at like designing stuff for the game was when Watcher came out, they worked out how to make better class-specific relics for her, because both of Watcher's class-specific relics are very good. I guess worth noting for Nuclear Battery, like, take Compile Driver is basically the way to make this stronger, and, like, yeah, the fact that this exists does make taking Compile Driver more appealing. Fission is another card that cares about it. Stuff that interacts with orbs, Um, in general, like all of defects, class-specific relics want you to take orb types of things, I suppose. Anyway, this one gives you 3 energy on turn 1, and if you don't want the 3 energy, you can retain it and have it on a different turn. Obscene. This one gives you an extra energy every time you leave calm, which, like, the existence of Violet Lotus, I guess, slightly inclines me more toward picking cards like Tantrum and Inner Peace, but I would take them anyway. Like, they're just pretty clearly Watcher's strongest synergy package, in my opinion. So, yeah, both of those class-specific relics just kind of reward you for playing the character the way that seems the strongest. And that's that. Yeah, this is why when people ask me, like, when you're playing the game, what are you thinking about? I'm not really able to answer them very well live because sometimes, like this mostly isn't what I'm thinking about, but it's one of the things I'm thinking about, right? Like when I'm spending like 20 to 30 seconds thinking about a card reward or something like that, I am thinking about this. But I'm also thinking about everything else. And yeah, it took me an hour and 20 minutes to kind of talk through this and imagine what happens if I try to talk through like all of the Act 2 Holy and Elite fights or something like that. Starts to take quite a while. Full-on lecture series. Maybe I could teach a college course. I don't know. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Be well, and I'll see you around.